Well, good morning. It's great to see you all here and have you all that are joining us in the chapel service and online. So we're in this second week of this series about faith, and what we've really been doing is we're kind of just walking through a few highlights of a particular character from the Old Testament, a guy by the name of Abraham. And his story is a perfect story to just like talk about faith, because that's something that we all will struggle with, try to understand, utilize. It's so central to what it means to follow Christ. So I was in a conversation with a men's small group a while back, and we were just kind of all talking about our day and our week and how it was going. And the guy that was leading it actually said, I want you to think about your spiritual faith journey with God. Like what's it been like? And asked us a few questions about it. And it was really interesting to watch all of us start to explain it at different moments, because there was kind of this similarity to it. We all had moments where we were like, man, we all had like some moment where we said, things were really good, right? Like I felt close to God, but then we all had moments where we were just like, I don't know. I woke up, a week ago and I didn't feel close to God for, like whatever reason it was, or moments where we talked about, just feeling like God was really using us, or we felt very bold in our faith or what we were doing. And then there were other moments where we just like felt like, well, no, I felt kind of weak and just like, I felt like I was being pushed around with temptations or whatever, or struggling with doubts. And then other moments where like, belief is like really easy or something. And as we talked about it, in fact, we were even using this. Like I noticed like halfway through the conversation, you're like, yeah, I feel like my faith journey has been kind of like this. And another guy's like, well, when I think about my faith journey, it's kind of like this over the last week, over the last few years. We're kind of going around. And part of it was like, because there was kind of this thing that we all felt, and maybe you feel this. If I were to say, if you could graph, right, and talk about like, being a good Westerner, right? If you could graph your your faith journey, we'd say, well, it should go up and to the right? We want to see a faith journey that would go like that. But isn't it true that like there's just moments where you like feel doubts creeping in about like, I don't know if I'm really doing what God wants me to do in this, or maybe even doubts over like God's existence. You don't feel strong about God being real, or maybe being active in this world, or maybe there's just a moment of some fear. Something's going on in your job and you're like, man, if I had more faith, right? Even in the face of this difficult thing at work or in my family, I think I'd be doing really strong. And sometimes it feels like we're just caught in this thing where it's going up and down. And if I were to say to you, what would your faith journey chart like? Like, what would it be? Would it, don't raise your hands, but like, would it be a little bit like this right here? Because I bet if you would say it looks a little bit like that, you wouldn't be alone. And as we look at Abraham, right, and he is known for being this person, this model of faith, I want us to think about our faith journey, because if he's supposed to be the model, like what are we to glean from this? And what's interesting is New Testament authors talk about this. So this isn't just like back when we look at his story, there's something about like he's the model of faith. It's like more than 1,000 years after Abraham, well over 1,000 years. New Testament writers say something. Let me read a few of these to you. So Paul, in his letter to the Galatians, chapter 3, he writes this in verse 9. He says, so those who rely on faith are blessed along with Abraham, this guy that we're looking at with Abraham, the man of faith, right? And he kind of gets this label, Abraham, the man of faith. And how many times we feel like, man, if only I had more faith, if I was, a man or a woman of faith. Another writer in the New Testament, who the author of the book of Hebrews, writes a lot about this. I want to read just one section to you. This is found in Hebrews chapter 11, starting in verse 8. It says this: by faith, Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. By faith, he made his home in the promised land like a stranger in a foreign country. He lived in tents. And just pause there for a second. He lived in tents, the man of faith. So if you're an outdoorsman, here's your verse. You may be more spiritual than you think, right? Okay. Total side note. But anyhow, right? There's not much left of the verse. It says, as did Isaac and Jacob, who were the heirs with him of the same promise. And Abraham he's just lifted up as this guy, this model for faith. And we think about Abraham, and most of us, we go, man, Abraham, man of faith. And his story takes up multiple chapters back in the book of Genesis. And our assumption is, right, he starts down here. In fact, we know from other parts of scripture that Abraham and his family, when they started off, like his father Terah, they were pagan worshipers. And yet he comes to be known in the New Testament as the man that is the man of faith. And what we assume is like the guy who started way down here, his faith journey looked like that, I bet, right there. And we think, isn't that what mine should look like? But here's what's interesting. If you go back and you chart Abraham's life through the Old Testament, you start to notice a really interesting thing. When you start to think about doubts and fears and good decisions and bad decisions and bold moments and really weak moments and all of that stuff, and you chart that all out, here's what you'll see with Abraham's life. Maybe he kind of starts down here, but it goes right like this. Yeah, it really does. And the thing that I want you to take away from this right at this moment is, what if when we think about I'm trying to chart my faith journey, and there's something real with this, we experience the reality of this, but what if you're not charting your faith journey? What if you're just charting life? What if life, because this is what Abraham's life looked like, what if life is just filled with ups and downs? What if life has a nature to it where there's moments where your sense of belief is gonna be high and moments where it's gonna be filled with doubt? What if there's moments in your faith journey or just in life where you're gonna be strong or weak or the fears are gonna creep in or moments that you're gonna feel like all of those things. See, I think sometimes we confuse our faith journey with just life. And so I want us to look at Abraham here because there's a few challenges that I want us to take out of his life that I think will help us all in our own life and in our own way of what it means to live out of faith. And the first challenge is simply this, okay? It's this: accept that it's normal to have ups and downs in life. If we look to Abraham as a model, one of the things that you're gonna see and one of the takeaways is, you know what? There's just gonna be ups and downs to life. And sometimes if we don't accept that, if we keep going back and we say, it's gotta be like this all of the time, I promise you're going to find moments that are filled with anxiety or moments that you're gonna have questions or doubts or moments that are gonna get hard, moments that you don't have God figured out. And if your expectation is, I should have God figured out all of the time more and more so I feel faithful and I know what I'm doing, you're gonna be disappointed. Because this is what life really is. And I want you to know this: we don't have ups and downs in life because God's not involved in our lives. We don't have ups and downs in our life because faith maybe isn't available. We have ups and downs in our life because life just has ups and downs. That there's something normal to that. So let's look at a couple more things with Abraham here. And he gets called Abraham and Abram, and he has a wife by the name of Sarah who also gets called Sarai in scripture. But I wanna go back and look at kind of how his journey begins. And we're gonna flip back to the book of Genesis. So if you have your Bibles, you can flip back to Genesis chapter 12. Because there's a couple of other things that I want us to know and see in his journey. Now, He starts off in the land of Ur, if you didn't know that. And that's where he and his father Terah and their relatives all start. And then they move to a place called Haran up north by the Tigris River. And it's somewhere in here that God actually calls Abraham, who's this pagan worshiper who doesn't know God at all. And he says, Abraham, I want to get to know you and I want you to get to know me. I want you to follow me. In fact, and he makes him this promise. I want to bless you and have a relationship with you that will end up blessing an entire family, because I'm going to give you this huge, massive family, and this family is going to turn into a nation. And out of this nation, I'm going to bless the whole world, right? This is God's way of moving toward humanity in this beautiful way. And he asks them to take this step of faith. He says, I want you to just follow me. I'm going to take you to this land that I'm going to promise you. I'm going to give you this land and I'm going to give you this family, all of these heirs, right? And so we begin to see this journey that Abraham has. And as we might expect, it starts to head up. And so when you look at Genesis chapter 12, verse 6, look at what happens here. Abraham just begins to follow him. It says, Abraham traveled through the land as far as the site of the great tree of Moreh in Shechem. At that time, the Canaanites were in the land. So he's now moved from Haran and he's now moving back down to where we think of like modern day Israel or Palestine, headed towards like the Dead Sea area. It says in verse 7, the Lord appeared to Abraham and said, to your offspring, I will give you this land. And again, this is part of that promise. So he built an altar there to the Lord who had appeared to him. And so you just see him like God's talking to him and he's building altars. And we're just like, this is what we'd expect from a man of faith, right? It's all going well. Verse 8, from there he went on towards the hills east of Bethel and pitched his tent with Bethel to the west and Ai to the east. And again, now he's moving more and more into the heart of what we think of as the promised land. There he built an altar to the Lord and called on the name of the Lord. And again, he just follows God and then he's building these altars and we just think, man, this is just like, wow, man of faith, right? And then it says, then Abram set out and continued toward the Negev. And now it's like he's arrived. He's trusted God and he's gotten to the land. And we think, right? If we didn't know how the story went on, we'd be like this is, you just keep on going like this. And yet, I want you to see what happens next here, right? It says, look at verse 10. Now there was a famine in the land, and Abram went down to Egypt to live there for a while because the famine was severe. Don't miss this. It's like as soon as he gets to the promised land after he's followed God by faith all this time, it's like he gets there and it's like, oh, now we got to leave because there's this famine in the land. And when you think of a famine, remember, this is in ancient times. And when there was a famine like this, there were no safety nets. There were no set in stone ways of like taking care of things. This would be a famine where all of the animals you would live on are starting to die, whether it's because of lack of food or water. The crops are drying up or gone. Like this is really severe. And you can imagine for him, there's this sense of fear that starts to set in this moment. And we all understand this. Ever have a moment where it's like, okay, I'm following God and I feel like I'm really trusting him and we're going this direction. Here's where God's gonna take me in my career. Man, I started this relationship. This is the right person. Here's where God's gonna take me in this relationship, right? Here's where God's gonna take me with my kids, with my friends. Like you think of the area. Ever have a moment where the circumstances just changed? And they changed in a way and you're just like, I don't get this, God. Why? Like imagine Abraham. Why did you bring me all the way here in your timing just to get there and I have to leave? Like that wasn't like, I'm thinking through all the times I built your altars, all the times we had our chit chats, all the time you promised, man, I'm gonna give you this promised land and it's gonna be wonderful and all these things. And all of a sudden the circumstances change. And the reason I bring this up is because I think sometimes we equate our circumstances with how we're doing with our faith. That if my life is going well, or I feel strong, and I look around and it's like, yeah, my life's coming together, and you feel like you've got faith, but in these moments where all of a sudden, right, your marriage isn't going the way you ever pictured, or one of you in that marriage has gotten, right, a bill of health that is filled with fear. And you're like, this is the person I was gonna grow old with. And all of a sudden now, one of us is gonna be fighting for our lives, or there's that sudden turn in your career. And it can be really easy in those moments to begin to feel like, is God in this? Did I lose my faith? Is like faith gone all of a sudden? And it's like fear sets in. And so a funny thing with fear is that as we begin to feel fear, we can either turn back towards faith, or we can let fear become the thing that begins to drive us more and more and more. And Abraham, the man of God, all of a sudden we watch fear just enter into his world. Like, because this is a famine, like what are you gonna do in this moment? And for him, it's like the only hope is we're gonna go down to Egypt. And so he's got this plan. We're gonna go down to Egypt, and that's where we'll take care of things down there. But what we begin to see with him is he's going to kind of double down on his fears, like, because he doesn't know what's going on. And so ever have a moment where there's something bad that happens and you feel like that worry or that sense of panic and your mind starts to race? And sometimes we don't always make the best decisions in those moments, right? It's like, okay, it's like everything's going wrong already. Like, so who cares? Maybe like I can't make it any worse, right? I made a terrible financial decision in this moment. God didn't help me out. And so and then you end up doing something that is even worse in that moment. And that's a little bit of like what he does here. It's like he doubles down on his panic. And instead of resting in faith, the faith that got him there, and here's what we often do with fear, right? It's like, okay, I'll take control now. Like, I'm not gonna live by faith. We're gonna live by me. And he takes control. And so here's what happens. And I want you to just picture this. Like, so he's got his wife, Sarah, there, and it's like, okay, we got to head to Egypt. And they travel down to Egypt. And just when they're on the outskirts of Egypt, here's what it says. Look at verse 11. You got to picture this conversation because it starts well, right? Look at verse 11. As he was about to enter Egypt, he said to his wife, Sarai, I know what a beautiful woman you are. Well, that's really sweet of him, right? I mean, we're getting ready to go to Egypt, or, maybe we'll go out on the town. You're so beautiful, honey. But that's not really what's going on in the back of his mind here, right? Look at what he says next. Look at verse 12. When the Egyptians see you, they will say, this is his wife. Then they will kill me, but let you live, right? Hey, we've got a problem coming up, and it's really you, not me. Because you're so pretty, right? It's just like all of a sudden this sweet compliment is like, whoa, huh? What? But he's got a great idea for this, right? Look at verse 13. Here's what I want you to do. Say you're my sister so that I will be treated well for your sake and my life will be spared because of you. So let's just do that and, we'll see what happens and we'll just roll with it, right? And it's like, huh? So when they think she's not married, now what's gonna happen? Well, we'll just roll with it, honey. Don't worry about it, right? Because I'll be safe, right? And you're just like, what are we doing here, right? But this is that moment where there's this fear. And so often when we face fear, there's a moment where it's like, okay, is faith even available right now? There's moments where when I think about when I charted my life, and on those bottom things, I was like, those are the places where I was feeling fear. So often when we feel fear, those are the moments where it's like, maybe I'm not being very faithful here. And here's the doubling down part. It's like, so if I've already blown it, why worry about trying to pull it all together again, right? This is the part where it's like, well, that was a terrible financial decision. Well, okay, so maybe I'll make another bet. Maybe I'll go buy something else I really don't need in this moment or can't afford because I've already spent too much on this, right? Or you let a relationship go where you don't really want that relationship to go, but you're like, oh man, it's already this far. Like, okay, who cares? Or you're in a argument with your spouse or one of your kids or someone you like a really close friend, and you've already said a few things and you're just like, man, I shouldn't have said that. I wish I wouldn't have said that, but I've already said that. So let's just let it fly in this moment, right? And then you really end up saying stuff. It's kind of like, I smell a little bit of a fire here. Let's just turn it into a bonfire in this moment. And there's a little bit of what Abraham does in this moment. It's just like, wow, I didn't see this coming. Like there's a famine in the land. It's just like it's like he takes all hands, away from the brakes of the system and just moves forward in this. So years ago, I don't know if my dad's in here or not, but I'm going to tell a story on you, Dad, if you're in here. So my dad worked construction his whole life, and I got to hang out with him a bunch. I actually worked construction with him some, and this was a sand and gravel outfit. So we made concrete and asphalt and that sort of stuff, big, heavy machinery. So one day on a Saturday, I think I was in high school, maybe middle school. One day on a Saturday, I went down to work on a work crew with my dad. It was a rainy day, sent the work crews, most of the guys home. And we went to check on a well or something out in the middle of the property. So we drive his company truck way out there in the middle of this rainstorm. And we get to this one spot, and there's kind of a dip, and you could see there was stagnant water, and it was really like muddy. And my dad's like, we probably shouldn't try and drive through that, but I think we can make it, right? Famous last words, like, and we just like get stuck down to the axles, right? And he keeps trying to get out, can't get out until it's just, you've really worked yourself in really well. And he's like, no problem. Let's just walk back to the yard and I'll get one of the big trucks. It's got lots of power. We'll pull it out. So we go back to the yard and we get, I think, if my dad's here, I think this is the right order. Went and got one of the larger trucks, and 20-minute walk, come drive the truck back, get it all hooked up. I get in the pickup truck, right? Because I'm going to put it in reverse and, and my dad's like, get ready. Here we go. Okay, ready, go. And now the big truck is like stuck down to its axles. And I'm like, how's that going, right? He's like, no problem. Let's go back, let's walk back to the yard. So we walk all the way back to the yard. This time, he's like, not messing around with trucks, right? So he gets a front end loader. And if you don't know what a front end loader is, it's a great big heavy piece of machinery that has that giant bucket on the front. Big, tall, wide tires. And we went and got the Caterpillar, or the Cat 966, okay? It was this yard loader that we had. Huge, like a ladder that you climb up to get in this thing. Probably weighed somewhere in the range of 25 to 30 tons, okay? So we take that back, and we've got like a big old chain this time. So he hooks up the big old chain to the back of the big truck, right? So now I get in the big truck, and I'm sitting there, and I'm like, okay, you tell me when to go. Okay, ready? Go. And these loaders, they articulate in the middle, and he's like, and he just gets it stuck in the mud. Okay, let's walk back to the yard. This time, we'll get the Cat 980, because it's way bigger than the 966, right? And this thing weighs, and I'm gonna take a guess. You in construction would know better than me. I bet a Cat 980 weighs somewhere in the neighborhood of like 30 to 40 tons, okay? Maybe even a little more than 40 tons, somewhere in there, okay? So we drive that back, right? And we hook it up, and now I'm in the 966 and my dad's in the 980, and we've got a giant cable this time. Ready? Ready, go. And we bury that one down into the ground where it can get. And it's kind of like a little parade, right? It's just like, and the plant was over at Orange Grove and I-10, and we were kind of just like a beautiful little stuck parade right along. Everyone driving down I-10 would be like, what happened there? I bet I know, right? Because they're watching two of us walk back to the yard. Because now maybe let's go get the 988, right? And the 988 weighs probably like 55 tons, right? And then my dad was like, And this is such a low point for a man. I'm just telling you, this is one of those points where like, you just never want to get to this spot. And he's like, maybe we need some help. Yeah, because we just need a bigger loader. Let's just get a bigger loader, right? And you can just see Abraham. We just need a better plan, right? You're going to be my sister this time. Let's just, right? I know things are going south, but let's just, instead of turning towards God for some help, right? The faith that led them from Ur to Haran all the way down to the promised land. No, we don't need that God right now, right? Like we'll handle this on our own. And there's this thing that happens to us in moments where in life, when life gets down here, it's like we think, well, faith is for these times, not these times. And it's so easy to just start making decision on decision that just makes things worse. And our man of faith is so good at modeling that for us as well, right? As they go in, and it's, guess who? The Pharaoh notices his wife and is like, wow, she's beautiful. I'll just take her for one of my wives. And it's like, oh, okay, plan's not going so well anymore all of a sudden, right? And there's this great temptation to just keep doubling down on the wrong things in these moments. And part of it is because there's this thing inside of us that when we're riding up here, we feel like, oh yeah, God, I need your help, right? It's so easy to feel like we can turn to faith in these moments. But have you ever noticed in these moments, like it's just like, I don't have faith. The faith spigot got turned off in my life. I'm sitting here and I doubt God in every way. I'm maybe mad at God, or I'm in pain, or I'm afraid, and it just feels like I'm abandoned or on my own. And it's so often in those moments that our answer is, I'm just gonna have to get a bigger loader, right? And it's like, whoa, wait a minute. Maybe that's not the right answer in all of this. But it happens so often. So here's my challenge. Here's my challenge in this one. Assume faith is available to you. Always. Always. Don't think that you have to. See, part of it is, it's like, well, you know what, God, let me get a bigger loader. Let me get a bigger loader. Let me get my life turned around. And God, when I get my life up here, that's when I'll turn to you in faith, right? That's when I'll feel like it's really easy to go to God in prayer in these moments. But I don't like to ask for help down here. Like, but can I promise you this? Here's the beautiful thing about faith that we learned from Abraham. Faith anywhere on here is always, always available to you. So assume that. Otherwise, you'll be waiting, and sometimes you'll get yourself stuck way deeper than you need to. So, third thing I want to close out on this. And this gets to, in our journeys, it's not just fear, but there are these moments of doubt that we're going to face. And I want to say this before I walk through this. Doubt isn't a bad thing. We oftentimes think of doubt as like, oh, if I'm doubting, then that means I must not have faith. And I need to get rid of my doubt before I could turn to God and have faith. I promise you that is not the case. Doubt is just a normal part of being a human being. But it still doesn't make it a fun thing as a human being to go through doubts or difficult moments. I remember a moment just a few years ago. It was in the middle of COVID, and our daughter Colette was up at NAU in school in the middle of college, and she started having this severe pain, and she went into the ER there, or an urgent care, Remember in COVID, it was hard to even get an appointment, like in an urgent care or whatever, and all your doctor's appointments were like, like on Zoom calls. And at first they thought it was a kidney stone, and they did a test, and they're like, no, it can't be a kidney stone, and they sent her home. And she goes through this thing over and over again, and she gets all of these telehealth calls on Zoom, and they all start with this place, okay, it's not a kidney stone, let's see what else it was, and they test, and they could never find it. And this goes on and on and on. And after a while, there was just this kind of doubt that set in. It's just like, God, why is she going? I'm watching her just shrivel up, and like this whole thing is just mounting in this way. And I'm down here and she's up there, and you've got two parents, and we're kind of going back and forth. Should we just go up there and get her and bring her back, or do we? And it's just like every moment is just like, okay, let's go and get her. Okay, she's doing better now. We come back here. And just, this whole thing, the whole time she really did have a kidney stone. The entire time. And so when you're trying to diagnose something that got ruled out at the very beginning, it just became this crazy thing. Our son Chandler was up there, and finally one night he was just like, I don't care what the doctors are saying, I'm going to get my sister, and I'm just taking her straight to the ER, and I'm saying, just start over. And instantly they figured out it was a kidney stone. She had to have surgery because it was stuck for so long. They were like, it's not gonna pass without surgery. But here's why I tell you this story. Because there was this doubt. There's a fatiguing thing about time. Have you noticed this? Like there'll be a moment where you're suffering through something, maybe it's with your health, or maybe it's something with work, and you're like, I'm gonna be strong. And you're strong, right? You've got faith. And the news can be bad, but you hang in there, you're strong. Sometimes we face this fatiguing thing where it goes on and on and on. You go to doctor's appointment after doctor's appointment after doctor's appointment until you start just thinking, I know what I'm gonna hear from the doctor. They don't know. And it just starts to wear you out and bury you in doubt. You have another interview and another interview and another interview. And you're like, I know God was leading me in a different direction, and I've interviewed for this job and that job and the things that I really feel like God was calling. I keep having these until you just get to the point you're just like, yeah, I know I think God was calling me in this direction, but I just have kind of given up. I think I'm just going through the motions, and I don't know that God's ever really going to do the thing that he seemed to call me to do. Or you see someone struggling in your family, one of your kids or your parent, and you just watch them struggle, and there's this thing about time that wears us down to the point that we want to give up. We think, right, that I've gone too far now to actually be able to live by faith, and I'm gonna have to muddle through on my own. And this happens, especially when we feel like life is like this. And that's part of what happens to Abraham at this point, right? God, way back here, said, I promise you, I'm gonna give you a family where your descendants will be more numerous than the stars in the sky, more numerous than the dust of the earth. Like if you could count all the grains of dust or sand, it'd be more than that. And he has waited and waited and waited. He and Sarah have tried to have a child, and they've not been able to have a child. And they finally reached this point of desperation where they're just like, this isn't working. And if God planned this, instead of turning to God and saying, okay, God, how do we move forward in this? It's kind of like they're just like, okay, we're gonna just have to figure out a way to move forward this ourselves. And so you see this, and this is all the way now in chapter 16. So in your Bibles, turn to chapter 16. And you just feel where they've struggled under kind of the paralyzing fear and doubt that this is ever gonna happen. We're never gonna have kids. So here's how they think they're gonna remedy the situation, starting in verse 1, chapter 16. Now Sarai, Adam's wife, had bore him no children, but she had an Egyptian slave named Hagar. And again, this is back in ancient times, and the idea of having a servant or a slave, very different to what we understand, but in ancient times, there was something very normal about this. Egyptian slave named Hagar. So she said to Abram, the Lord has kept me from having children. Go, sleep with my slave. Perhaps I can build a family through her. Now, God isn't in this part of the plan. This isn't God's plan in this moment. And there's just a part of them that are just like, hey, like maybe this is the way forward. We're too far gone, and we're going to have to do this ourselves. And then in a classic answer from a man, right? When his wife comes and says, I think you're going to have to sleep with her so that we can have kids, right? Look at the second half of verse 2. Abram agreed to what Sarah said. Okay, if you say so. It's like, dude, bad decision on this, both of you, right? And this is verse 3, so after Abram had been living in Canaan 10 years, Sarah and his wife took her Egyptian slave Hagar and gave her to her husband to be his wife. He slept with Hagar and she conceived, right? And so part of it was, instead of turning to faith in this moment, it's just like, okay, I think if this is where God wants us to go, we're gonna have to do this ourselves. And it's like they give up on the idea that the faith that brought them there is the faith that they would continue to live with in this. And so I know this is gonna sound like a shocker to you, okay? But it caused problems in the house. Yeah, the Bible actually talks about it. You can read the chapter on your own. But Hagar basically is like, wow, my mistress, who's been trying for decades to have a child to get pregnant with her husband Abraham, couldn't do that. And guess what? Now I'm pregnant with his child. I'm something really special. And she just lords it over Sarah. Guess how she took that? Not very well. And so she has a conversation with Abraham, in which Abraham is just like, oh man, I don't want to be in the middle of this. And it's like, too late, buddy. You back in halfway through verse 2, you made a choice that got you in this mess. And so he's just like, you handle it however you want to handle it. And her way of handling it is, you hurt me, I'm going to hurt you back. And it becomes this huge ordeal. And you look back at these two families, the tension and controversy that got started here almost 4,000 years ago is still going on in the Middle East today because of this, right? And it just started with this doubt and feeling like, there's no faith here. I can't turn to God in this moment, right? And it begins to play out. But here's something that I want you to see with Abraham. And this is the beautiful thing about Abraham. Abraham, even when he reached these points where out of doubt or fear, he turned away from God to handle things his own. When it started to go south, you know what we see with Abraham again and again and again is he's like, maybe I really do need to turn back to God in faith. The thing that makes Abraham a man of faith is not his shining moral character. It's not his steadfastness to make great decisions all of the time. It was his ability to say, let's see, I got a bigger truck, I got a bigger loader, I got a bigger loader. Maybe I shouldn't go back and just get the next bigger loader. Maybe I really do need God's help. This is a lesson we should not lose about Abraham. He saw faith that no matter how stuck he got was the thing that he could still turn toward. And even after this moment, he does. And one of the lessons we learn here is you're never gone too far to turn back to God. So here's my challenge. Wherever you are in this, you have to interrupt the cycle. If there's a cycle where you keep going back for the bigger loader, right? Break the cycle. So here's my challenge. It's to stop and just turn to whatever faith means to you in that moment. Whatever God has put in front of you in that moment, trust him with that. Even if you don't have everything else figured out, trust him for what's in front of you. Stop, turn to him, and trust him in that moment, right? It's interesting, when we were walking back to the plant for our, third or fourth, I don't know how many 20-minute walks we had back to the plant. But he started figuring out, okay, I'm gonna have to go find this guy, right? And my dad came back with a whole crew of people. They brought the 988 loader along with several huge end-dump loaders and trucks. They literally built a road from the frontage road along I-10 out to where the first loader was stuck, and then and slowly pulled them all out of there. And so if you see a road over there that just seems like it goes to nowhere, my dad built that, okay? Because there is a moment where you have to say, even though it doesn't feel like it, I'm gonna trust that faith is still made available to me by God. And I'm gonna stop and I'm gonna turn toward him in this moment. Can I give you two things about this? Just close out with this. First, pay attention to when you're in a moment where you are most likely to give up on faith. Where is that for you? Is that with doubt? Is it with fear? Some of you, fear becomes the moment you turn to faith like that, right? For some of you, when you feel fear, that's where you turn away. Maybe it's doubt. Maybe it's a relational thing. Maybe it's with your career. Maybe it's with your kids. I don't know what it is. But notice, where are the moments where this is where I'm gonna struggle with this? And then ask yourself this question. What's it like in the moments where faith is easy? Because I bet you have some moments where faith is easy, where you're just like, okay, I can trust God with that. What is it that you do when faith is easy? How do you pray? How do you think? What do you read? Who do you talk to? What is that like for you? Because here's the second part of this. When you can identify it, right? The moments that you're gonna struggle, and when you can identify what you do when faith is easy, I want you to turn to God in prayer. And I want you to treat that hard moment in the exact same way that you treat the easy moments. And you're like, but Glenn, and those mean it's easy to believe in it. In the same way that you pray to God when you're up here and it's easy, I want you to assume that God is listening to you just as much in this moment as he is this moment. I want you to assume that God has something for you in this moment in as much as he does this moment. Because your job is not to make it happen. Your job is to trust. That is what faith is. Trust him. Turn to him in prayer and trust him. So I want to close out this morning just a little bit differently. So normally I would say a few things about, the room and prayer and all this stuff, and then I'd pray for you to be dismissed. I want to do something a little different. I want to pray for you in your faith journey. And then after I'm done praying, then I'll give you some instructions and we'll be done. Okay, so let me have a chance to just pray for you this morning. So would you bow your heads in prayer with me here? Father, I just lift up every single person in this room, and I know every one of them in one way or another is on a kind of spiritual journey. And that spiritual journey takes faith. Whether there's someone here that is journeying to even trust that you are real or that you're God or that they would put their faith in you, to the most veteran Christian in here who's followed you through highs and lows. I pray for every one of them, wherever they are at, that you would give them eyes to see that faith in you is always available. And I pray that you would encourage them in whatever they face, whether it's a high moment or a low moment right now, that they can turn to you and that you are there for them. And I pray that their next steps forward are ones that are basked in the faith and trust of what you have for them. And I pray this in your son's name, amen. And I meant everything I prayed for you, wherever you are this morning. So before we close, let me just say this. If you're like, I could use some more prayer, Glenn, well, that's available. We have some people over here in our prayer place that would love to pray for you this morning. If you're a guest this morning, it is so good to have you here. And I want to invite you, come and see someone right over here at the Next Steps area and just shake their hand. Or if you've got questions about the church or whatever it might be, it is so good to have you here this morning. Have a fantastic week and Sunday, and may God be with you. Amen. See you next week.